Welcome to another installment of Deconstructing Babylon, where we discern the signs and symbols of the mystery religion of Hollywood Babylon. I'm the Discerning Clerk, and I use a biblical framework to deconstruct my favorite movies from the 90s.
Noticed your eyeglasses. They don't have any lenses in them.
They're my dad's. The lenses hurt my eyes.
Outer space, space travel, space exploration, and star worship are massive themes in Hollywood Babylon since its inception. NASA, the famed Space Force at the helm of these themes, was formed in 1958 from other agencies and includes input and finances from people like Jack Parsons, Werner von Braun, Walt Disney, L. Ron Hubbard, and Aleister Crowley, allegedly, in my opinion. We're talking about false religions, Hollywood, sex magic, and technology combined to create an agency to fool the masses and take our eyes off the Most High. Again, allegedly, in my opinion. I gotta use protective language here. But since before 1958 until this day, NASA has successfully lied to the people of the world about what's possible and probable beyond the firmament. They call it atmosphere. Recently, NASA has been inserted in the legacy media due to some astronauts being stranded on the space station and finally making it to Earth after 9 months. Spoiler alert, they never left Earth because we live in a closed system. But the majority of people believe that story, just like they believed the story today's selection is based on. Apollo 13 came out in 1995, won awards, and has a high audience rating. Even the Video Movie Guide gives it 4 stars. Director Ron Howard does the next to impossible with this first-rate motion picture. He turns a piece of recent history into edge-of-your-seat entertainment. Based entirely on the real-life adventures of the Apollo 13 astronauts, who came perilously close to death during their mission, this film features a top flight cast and an insightful screenplay. Rated PG. This film finally scratches Tom Hanks off my list to deconstruct, but I honestly didn't think this would ever be a film I would examine on this channel, because I know how much the idea of space is beloved by most people, even people in the church. I know how divisive this issue is, and believe it or not, I don't make these videos to be rage bait, though this one may be seen that way. I make these videos so that God's chosen people are not deceived in the last days, which we are clearly in. And I beseech you, as I always do, to seek the Most High in prayer and His Word. May He reveal the truth to you, should He see fit to do so. Now, let's see what we see in Apollo 13. The movie starts with the Apollo 1 pre-launch test, which tragically killed the 3 men on board. The voiceover of reporter Walter Cronkite tells us of the space race of the late 60s and the immense achievement of United States officials making it to the moon before foreign nationals. Famed expedition on the Apollo 11 that was miraculously live-streamed to the nation. Modern NASA scientists tell us the reason we've never been back to the moon is because they lost the technology. But it's really because we are in a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth, and you can't land a spaceship on a light. Oh, y'all, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this. The moon landing is like the gateway conspiracy, you know, and I digress. We are introduced to Mission Commander Jim Lovell.
Jim Lovell.
Hi.
This is Tracy.
How do you do, Tracy?
This is the man. Gemini 7, Gemini 12, Apollo 8. They were the first ones
Stop it,
around the moon.
NASA's spacecrafts and subsequent missions have interesting names that point to the very stars they worship. I've spoken before about the stars and constellations being named for and worshipped as Greco-Roman gods. Gemini, of course, refers to the constellation and astrological sign. Gemini are twins, which is a symbol often used to represent duality, like the Twin Towers on 9/11 or twin pillars in the Masonic Temple. Apollo is himself a twin to Artemis. Apollo was one of the 12 Olympians victorious over the Titans and is a Greek deity known as the god of archery, music, truth, and prophecy. We also meet pilots Fred Hayes and Ken Mattingly, who are all anticipated to land on the moon again, like the Apollo 11 mission before them.
Let's hear it for Jim Lovell, Ken Mattingly, Fred Hayes.
This watch party the Lovells are hosting to watch the historic event was evidently very common at the time. Remember the scene from Blast from the Past? Though no one is questioning how the camera was set up to capture the moonwalk or the shuttle departure.
On this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Instead, we're all awestruck and amazed at the so-called advancements that allegedly benefit all creation made in the image of the Most High.
It's not a miracle. We just decided to go.
If it was just a decision, why can't we decide to go back? Why can't we go somewhere else off planet, like Mars, where Elon wants to set up? Deciding to go isn't the thing, because it would be a miracle, an act of the Most High to even get there. Building the Tower of Babel was a decision for the same reason, but they couldn't do it.
The best part of each one of us, the belief that anything is possible.
We learned that Jim wasn't the original commander for the Apollo 13 mission, but it was a man named Alan Shepard, who couldn't go because of an ear infection. An ear infection. The backup crew becomes the prime crew, and they spend the next 6 months preparing to go to the moon. That's a severe ear infection to last 6 months and not recover. They have a new backup crew who doesn't get the same preparation time in the simulator. And why not? Aren't they like the understudy? Jim's wife Marilyn has a terrible dream in which she sees the spacecraft come apart at the seams and her husband lost to the vacuum of space. It reminds me of Pilate's wife having a prophetic dream before Messiah's crucifixion.
This is the Saturn IV-B booster, and it shoots us away from the Earth as fast as a bullet from a gun, until the moon's gravity actually grabs us and pulls us.
Oh boy, another massive lie. If the moon landing itself is a gateway conspiracy, it eventually leads you to question other things, like gravity. I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it. We live in a closed system. We cannot leave Earth, and that's by design for our protection. The number 13 keeps being mentioned, obviously because it's the Apollo Mission 13, but I suppose the stigma also associated with the so-called unlucky number.
Apollo 13, lifting off at 1,300 hours and 13 minutes, and entering the moon's gravity on April 13th.
13 is often associated with bad things happening, even to this day. And maybe there's some validity to that belief, but I also learned that it has close ties to the moon, as there are 13 lunar cycles in a calendar year. 2 days before the launch, a member of the backup team contracts the measles.
I just got some blood work back from the lab. Charlie Duke has the measles.
This seems especially suspicious to me considering current events regarding this particular virus. Anyway, as a result, Ken Mattingly has to come off the prime launch team because he's never had the measles, and the likelihood of him getting sick in space is high and would be detrimental to the team. They replace him with another pilot from the backup team, Jack Swigert. This narrative of close association between space and virus is strange. There really shouldn't be a tied narrative, but we see it again and again. Even now, Elon Musk has associations with both space and vaccines.
I mean, I know it's their ass if I get sick up there, but I mean, Jesus!
Jim and Fred both doubt Jack's ability to pilot the high-stakes flight, and literally none of this adds up for me. The original commander gets an ear infection 6 months prior, and the entire prime team is replaced. Seems like a grand overcorrection. But then 2 days before the launch, someone on the backup team gets measles, which impacts the prime team somehow. And the backup pilot gets put on the prime team, which is why they have a backup team in the first place.
We don't want Daddy to get any of our germs and get sick in outer space, right?
My brief research into the MMR vaccine says it was developed and administered widely in 1967. So by 1969, most Americans would have received it, regardless if they had had measles before. This underlying fear campaign has been around for more than 50 years and is still going strong. Anyway, the hastily assembled flight team finally prepares for launch in Florida, and we meet the lead at Mission Control in Texas, Christoph. Just kidding. It's Gene Kranz in his fancy waistcoat. But why is it like this? Why do they launch rockets from Florida and navigate from Houston?
Launch Control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
They launch into space, where they drop the rockets off the module. Question. If they needed rocket force to break through the firmament, how do they get through it coming home without the same jet propulsion? And if your answer is gravity, or the gravitational pull of the Earth, please sincerely question that. By day 3 of them floating in outer space, the astronauts broadcast live from the shuttle, Odyssey.
That was supposed to be the theme to 2001 in honor of our command module Odyssey.
Is that a Stanley Kubrick film reference? I think the theme from 2001 would have been far too on the nose, since he was the director of the Apollo 11 moonwalk. Instead of actually broadcasting to Americans, we learned that none of the TV networks even bothered to pick it up. Apparently, Americans were already bored with NASA. Or maybe people started to see the lies coming from the space agency and the associated networks. Allegedly, in my opinion. The plan for the crew is to precisely land in a specific spot on the moon called the Frau Mora Highlands, which they say is a formation around a large crater of the same name. The astronauts were meant to obtain samples of the formation in order to carbon date the moon. The name Frau Mora comes from a 15th century monk who was famed for his creation of a detailed world map that only included Asia, Africa, and Europe. Hey, your guess is as good as mine as to why this obscure cartographer is the namesake for a mountain range on the moon. But I digress. Again.
Houston, we have a problem.
This module, held together by tinfoil and duct tape, fails during a routine exercise, and all hell breaks loose. They experience a mass oxygen leak, and it's only a matter of time before they lose it all.
The ship's bleeding to death.
The only solution to preserve life is to bring the crew and busted shuttle back home, which means they can't and won't land on the moon.
We just lost the moon.
The Odyssey will lose all power and oxygen within 15 minutes. And does time work the same in space? It feels like it shouldn't, but what do I know? Just that we cannot leave Earth because it's a closed system, and that the great lights were given for signs and seasons and passing of time. They have to transfer navigation to the LEM, the lunar module called Aquarius, which was only made to land on the surface and not be a vehicle for deep space travel.
We designed the LEM to land on the moon.
The plan is to boomerang around the moon, using its gravity to launch the low-powered, non-navigational module that was not designed to hold 3 adult men for 4 days in deep space and re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Speaking of the Earth, it's looking awfully stationary, because it's not just a closed system, but it's fixed in place and not spinning around at monumental speeds.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch.
Ken, the astronaut left behind for measles, is brought in to work the simulator to help his crewmates with the re-entry procedure. The problems continue to mount as power conservation is a concern, then carbon dioxide buildup, and the freezing cold creeping in. Not to mention diminishing food and water, and a raging case of the clap threaten their lives before they even get close to home.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Scientists on the ground managed to remedy the increased CO2 levels, but power, water, cold, and time are still against them.
It's just a little medical mutiny, Doc. I'm sure the guys are still with us.
As the lunar module drifts closer to Earth, they talk about them making it through a re-entry corridor, but they may as well call it a portal. As suspected, they need a fair amount of force to get through the firmament. I mean, atmosphere. Atmosphere makes it sound possible, which is why they call it that. The re-entry procedure is the last major hurdle with having enough power to operate everything on the ship. Ken comes in clutch with procedures, and he's the one to save them all.
Are the flowers blooming in Houston?
That's a negative, Jim. I don't have the measles.
That's shade. Iconic. Ken's procedures work, and they release the damaged ship from the module, and now it's essentially space junk, just floating in the vacuum of space. See how silly that sounds?
Perhaps never in human history has the entire world been united by such a global drama.
Oh, just wait until 2001, and then again in 2020. These are the new precedents, just as fear-inducing and just as fictional.
Rome, Pope Paul led 50,000 people in prayers for the safe return of the astronauts. In Jerusalem, prayers at the Wailing Wall.
All anyone can do now is wait with bated breath to see if God really has answered all their prayers.
Oh, Houston, this is Honesty. It's good to see you again.
Miraculously, they make it back alive and well. Jim gives a voiceover update of crew and control members, even stating that he watched other men after him walk on the moon and return home. And I'd never heard that before. I thought only Apollo 11 astronauts and Michael Jackson did a moonwalk.
When will we be going back? And who will that be?
And just like that, the movie abruptly ends as a blurry Jim walks out of frame for the final image. At the risk of alienating all who have even made it this far, I'm sure my statements belie me as a flat earther. And while that's true, I more accurately ascribe to the truth of the Bible and what's called biblical cosmology. The closed system, the firmament, the great lights, the fixed nature of our home that God made good. As far as what's beyond the firmament, which is a solid, impenetrable dome that encloses the earth, I believe it's water, not space. And I think NASA knows that too. And why else do they train their spacewalkers in large pools of water? They know they can't break through the firmament, but they aren't willing to admit the biblical view of creation. We don't revolve around the sun. The sun is a local light fixed in its course in the firmament. I know I'm in the vast minority of people who believe this, and I would just ask that you reserve judgment about my views based on what God's word says. I hope it causes you to really search the scriptures, not as a confirmation bias, but to question the narrative. All right, that's out of the way. Let's get back to why we're here. I think this was the first movie I've deconstructed that was based on real people and so-called historical events. My own parents were teens at this time, probably the same age as Jim's children in the film, and they have vivid memories of the broadcast being a very emotionally tense time. Even watching these scenes of a movie made me choke up, which is weird, but I think it proves the emotional manipulation tactics because they work, and they still work. See 9/11 broadcast? NASA as an organization has gone through the ringer throughout the decades. Its reputation has been up and down, and it demands affection from the public. The 90s were a time when its reputation was low, which is why I think these movies came out to spin NASA in a positive light, and to remind those watching that they're the good guys. By now, in 2025, their reputation is low again, which is why they're back in the legacy media and Hollywood productions. Coming into viewing this movie, I was expecting a certain amount of propaganda regarding space, but I was not expecting the viral measles association, and I don't even know how to make sense of it. Recently, measles has made the legacy news outlets, as well as the virus has outbroken in different areas of the United States and Canada, and probably worldwide, to be honest, but it ultimately comes down to a fear campaign to push vaccines, allegedly, in my opinion. Back in 1969, the vaccine schedule was around 12 doses by the age of 16, most of them given in infancy. And I misspoke earlier when I said the MMR was available in 1969. At the time, it was just a mumps dose and a separate rubella dose. MMR, the combined shot including measles, wasn't available until 1971. When this movie came out in 1995, the doses increased to over 22 by the age of 16. In 2025, Health Canada shows a routine schedule of almost 40 doses by the age of 17. So what does it all mean? And what does it have to do with space travel? I really don't know. But there is a clear link that this and other movies prove out. The answer isn't out there somewhere. The cure for what ails us isn't floating in the vacuum of space or even in the waters above the firmament. And that's probably not the point. Again, I don't know, but it's all very suspicious. All right, that was a hot mess. Thank you for your enduring to the end. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it and a thumbs down if you didn't. This one will probably get me ratioed worse than Dogma, so subscribe if you want to, but don't follow me. Follow the one who saves you. And until next time, keep looking up.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.